So I'm still figuring out the content that we're doing here on the channel, but one of the things that I want to do as I start traveling, collaborating, working with people across the course of next year, and growing this space is not just share the information that I have. Like I said, I'm inexperienced in this, right? I am still learning on the process of discovery, and this is all about documenting. And part of that story is documenting the people that are in my life, that are influencing or I admire or look up to, or in our case, actively working with and collaborating with to improve, to pursue, to do something that I've always dreamed of. So I have Mr. Alexander
Radcliffe
Alexander Radcliffe Sender III from BoardGameCo. If you're not familiar with BoardGameCo, it is a adjacent board game channel to Quackalope. We're both right around 20,000 subscribers. You've been operating for just around a year. And I would say you are, as far as I can read, the fastest growing independent board game content creator in the space over the last year.
Could be.
We're competitive,
Very
but
competitive.
You've paced me quite a bit. I've just been able to maintain once I saw that he was chasing me down, kind of, slightly. You're still pacing me.
I'm trying. I'm trying to keep up.
So this conversation has to do with something that you have encouraged me to do.
Yes.
To
an extent.
You're one of the most valuable things you have that I do not have or did not have, and I am working on actively, is your methodology, organization, the structure that you present around your life, around your channel, around the things that you do that need to be productive.
Yep.
You have a family that you care about, you have kids that you spend time with, you have another job, this job,
Yes.
and you still have time to play games, live life, explore, and practice the things that are important to you. So I just wanted to pick your brain for a bit.
Sure.
About organization, about that structure, about things that I might be able to, and here'd be the invitation, right? We have a relationship.
Yes, we do. Hopefully, I think so.
I would even venture to be as far as give me specific advice for what I could, like from what you've observed from my journey, because I think that will help people understand, and like specific advice can sometimes be more beneficial than general this type of stuff.
I'll start with something general, a general concept I remember hearing once that has really stuck with me ever since I heard it, and then I'll go through a few general specifics around a methodology. And the first is the idea that I remember hearing it at some speaker somewhere, I can't remember what it was, and part of this balance, this structure is going to be from the fact that I have spent the past 6 years being involved in organizations, going through courses, going through conferences, picking things up, and finding the ones that work best for me. This is not me magically figuring out, reinventing the wheel.
Of course.
You can get books, Get Things Done, or Get It Done is one of the more famous ones that really has a concept, a core structure around it.
Okay.
But one thing that really resonated with me is the idea that life and our time is a plate. And in general, when your plate's full, and you just want another scooping of mashed potatoes, and you just shove it onto the plate without worrying about what goes on and what goes off, things will fall off. It's not that you get to choose what falls off. When you shove things onto a crowded plate, things that you may not choose fall off. And what that means is if you really want to make room for something else, and you don't want just whatever else to just magically fall off that plate, you have to choose in advance what you're taking off before you put something new on. That's the way you maintain control. When you just keep adding and adding and adding, things fall by the wayside and may not be what you wanted. And they could be, and often if you have like a lot of relationships, family, all that, often the things that do get pushed off do tend to be family, because those relationships can kind of weather being abandoned for a bit before they really hurt you. But in the long run, they will hurt you. But even if it's not family, whatever it is, you take too much on your schedule, you commit to too many things. If you don't decide what is being taken off, then you won't decide what's being taken off. And so that concept has really stuck with me. And so as you talked about, you mentioned I have a job and multiple jobs, and then YouTube, and then a family, and board games, and all this. Every single time something was added, I've taken something off. I have purposely. I've sat there and said, this is being added to my life. This is going to come off. And I don't measure it perfectly in time. I don't do that. But I have a concentrated degree of, I know something is leaving. And over the years, as I've added things, multiple things have left. I used to be into painting miniatures. I no longer do it. I want to do it. I really do. And maybe one day I'll come back to it. But right now, it's taking a break. Hobbies, from anything from painting Bob Ross to juggling to magic, all these things over the years, drawing, has slowly been shifted off to the side as I took on more different things.
Purposely.
Reading books and watching TV shows. watching TV shows in the background, but reading books concentratedly. I don't read like I used to.
Yeah.
I read rule books now because I'm more involved in board games, and that's a dedicated choice. Sure. I'll still pull up the occasional book.
It's one of the things that I'm working on this channel is getting back into that habit because I think it's valuable.
Video games, all these things have slowly come off. I've more and more. I've added things to my life, but taken other things off with dedication. I used to power through a TV show and a season a week in the background doing whatever.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of time in my life because I've chosen to give it up for now. Maybe forever, who knows? Some of the things I've given up I value and want to get back. Others I value less.
At all.
Some things don't miss at all. And so that's the first general abstract concept. When you put something else in, take something off with dedication.
How are you tracking? Are you tracking things ambiently in terms of kind of moving the miniature, or do you have a very good sense?
No, it's general.
These are the things I'm doing, and consciously, miniature painting, I'm not doing it right now. I'm literally, I've made a choice. It is not a thing I do right now.
Yes. So it's just a general, like I know that I'm adding things to my life, and so I have to take off those concepts. And again, I don't match it up hour for hour. I don't know that much.
Sure, I hear you.
But like, I dedicatedly will say, I am no longer doing this thing the way I used to. I might still pop up, like TV shows. I still watch TV shows, but now it takes me like 3 months to get through a season of TV.
And you do it as a date night.
Yeah.
You have the concept of doubling up on time, which...
Oh, well, no. Date night is still prioritized. That's one of the things I've kept in my life.
Yeah, but prioritized, but you're doing some of those things during date night. Yes. You're having a good dinner. You're spending time with the wife. You're watching a TV show together.
Yes.
And that is something that you've moved out of every other aspect.
Yeah.
But still value in some context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna, and some of these things can be done with hiring other people too. That's a thing I've done as well. There are parts of like, for instance, I run BoardGameCo as a company as well as a YouTube channel. And over the past year, while doing this, I have spent money to hire someone else to take on some of the aspects I did because I just have been putting time elsewhere. So it could be that as well.
So the elements of organization.
Yes.
What do most people, or what do I specifically overlook or miss when it comes to... Because I'm on this process of like, I usually go all or nothing. And I'm trying not to do that with this process. I've given myself like a 6-month window to become 1% better at it. But 1% better at it every day, it like would be really, really beneficial to me. So from your experience and from your application, what are some of the lessons learned? What are some of the things that are invaluable that you wish you could have?
From a more concrete thing as opposed to the general concept of just making time, there are multiple things I've done over the years that have really been beneficial. And there are multiple softwares I've gone through. Software is going to be a big part of this conversation. Okay. Knowing the tools you have at your disposal, knowing how to use them, and sticking with something is going to be a huge thing. One
of the series that I will be bringing to the channel is the concept of becoming an expert at the things you're using every day.
Yes.
Trello, Google Calendar, Gmail, even YouTube and things like that. I want to do a deep dive into those platforms and spend a week learning them and then a week teaching them.
It's worthwhile. It's worthwhile. You get these things, and I've gone through dozens over the years, and even as I've shifted from one to the next, it hasn't stopped the fact that while I used that one, I was organized while I used it. And then something got messy, something shifted, maybe I liked a different platform, and I moved things over, started with the next one. There's a bit of time wasted in that transfer, but along the way, you're constantly organized. And so for me, for right now, using a good example from the way I organize right now I primarily live my life through a combination of email, Notion, and Google Calendar. Okay. Notion is going to be a Trello competitor that is more flexible in what it does.
I use Trello right now.
So I use Trello for a long time, and I'm still in the middle of porting things over from Trello, going back to that thing. I like Trello. Notion I like better. There's a lot of reasons, one of which is going to be the fact that you can actually export things and use them in different forms, but there's a lot of flexibility that Notion brings to the table that makes it a better option for me. That being said, I've used Trello successfully for the past 5 years, so it's not a bad thing at all.
Sure.
But it's the idea of you pick a system. And let's say, for me, let's narrow that down to 2 concepts. Ideas and scheduling. Those are 2 concepts that I'll touch upon here. So ideas are the concept that whenever I have idea, I've done this multiple times throughout the day, I pull out my phone and either enter it directly in Notion if I know exactly what I want to do with it, or I shoot myself an email if I'm not yet sure how this is playing out. So it's a concept. I want to flesh it out. I don't know exactly where my own
Get it out of your headspace.
Get it out of my head.
Yeah.
Now, I don't do that. I don't randomly throw things into Notion because I personally have found that if I throw something in there before it's ready to know exactly where in that space I want it, then it starts turning that Notion board into a mess. Versus in my email and this is time and attention, but over the years of using my email in a certain way, of clearing out my inbox on a regular basis, something that's a mess in my email, will be processed, will be organized, will be cataloged, and then it'll go to where it needs to be. So to me, my email is kind of my dumping ground of just concepts. That way it's not in my head. I'm not sitting here thinking, what were those 4 things I thought of while I was here with you? What were those 4 concepts that were in my head? Anything that, and this is a general concept from Get It Done in general. If you have an idea, immediately in some way, whatever your system is, whatever your note-taking is, in some way get it out of your head so you're not spending time trying to remember things. That is a waste of mental energy. And so that's the first step. Move something to email.
I have been modeling some stuff after that.
Yeah,
like if people have been actually following along and watching some of the, like, you'll see some of these lessons, or that lesson specifically, I am trying to adapt into how I'm structuring things.
Yes, it's awesome. And from there, like I said, so the next step would be Notion. Notion, for me, I currently have like 5 or 6 different boards, which are just represent different concepts. So let's say, for instance, YouTube is a good example, or YouTube and board games. I have a Notion board that consists of all my board games and the rankings that I have for those games. Just more personal, but relevant to some of the topics I'll cover. I have a Notion board related to the reviews, because I do board game reviews and I owe them to publishers. If a publisher sends me a game, I owe them a review. So I have a board where I track where that is, whether there's an expected date on that board, which I can easily tag in. I track how many plays I have of that game, because I want to make sure I'm going to get a bunch of plays in. So I have all these metrics, but it's all tracked. And as soon as I get a game, when a game shows up at my doorstep from the publisher, it goes immediately onto the board. Or even before, if I know it's coming, sometimes I'll just be like, oh, I know I'm getting this game, and it goes on the board. And that way it's there. That obligation is not some thing on a shelf that I have to mentally find and worry and wonder. It's on a board. And it's prioritized by whatever system I gave it as it came in. And that priority system can be constantly evolved. But it's mental training. It's gymnastics of, you go through that process, you get the game, you do the thing, and you just build up these muscle habits that turn into a system. I have a Notion board for all my YouTube ideas. Anything that's going to be an idea, I put it in there.
Just jot it down. And
I have one column for completely undeveloped, where it's literally just kind of almost like my email to an extent. It's just an idea that I'll flesh out. The next column is when I start fleshing it out. And then I have columns for, okay, now I'm actually filming it, versus now it's ready for publishing. I have columns tracking all of those things. So all ideas, all things are being tracked at some point in time with what I'm doing with it. And that would be Notion, covering all those aspects. And the last thing for me, I haven't always used as consistently. In fact, I would argue I have not been as good at it as many people I know, which is the concept of a calendar. I know people who live their lives by their calendar, their Outlook calendar, their Google calendar, whatever they use. And that can be very helpful. And for me, I have missed many a meeting because I didn't live my life that way. I didn't look at my calendar every single minute. I didn't have that pop-up. I didn't have my phone integrated. And so it was like, oh, but it's on your calendar. You should have been at the meeting. And I'm showing up 3 minutes late because I didn't build up that habit. But with Google Calendar, recently I started using Google Calendar more consistently, and I've built it up as something that I trust. And a big part of that, in general, a big part of any system you trust is eliminating the mess. If you don't eliminate the mess, it becomes a dead system. If you have things in your Google Calendar that aren't actual requirements, they're generic things you put in your thing to, I don't know, call Aunt Susan before bed. Like if you have some random thing in your calendar that isn't actually an action item, it's going to work against you.
Yeah.
You will learn to ignore your calendar.
Yeah.
If you clean up your calendar and treat it as something that is actually a reminder system, actually something to flesh out, then it will trigger action items. And so I lock that in. For me, for content creation, for scheduling, I lock it all in there. I put it in Google Calendar. I have tags for where the prep is of something, but it's all there. It's a reminder. I just pop to my Google Calendar, and in a moment, I know here's where I am for the next week. Here's what I have coming up.
What's there, yeah.
And so, ultimately, it's going to come down to tools. Find the tools that work for you. There are tons of tools I can recommend. There's Workflowy, there's Notion, there's Trello.
How do you, with the plethora of tools, I think this will be where I end, though. Sure. With the plethora of tools that are out there, how do you go about digging and finding one that might fit your need? Like, how do you identify the need that you need, like the tool that you need for the problem that you have?
I wish I had a magic bullet answer for this. I don't. If I spoke to an individual and I asked them about what need they're trying to fix, I could recommend one with more precision. For sure. You tell me what you're trying to do, and I could say, oh, this tool is very good at that. This tool is very good at that. I will say Notion, one of the strengths of Notion is that it is multifaceted in the way it works. It can be a Kanban board. It can be a to-do list. It can be a note-taking. It has flexibility to really operate in a variety of ways. One of the downsides of Notion is until you learn how it operates, it can be a little bit overwhelming because you're like, well, I mean, when you walk into Trello as a Kanban board, if you're familiar with the concept, Trello is a simple, easy, elegant Kanban board. It doesn't do a lot of what Notion does, but it all makes sense as soon as you walk in there. So there's always pros and cons to every tool. Without knowing more about any individual's unique circumstances, I would just say that there are solid ones out there. There's Todoist, not to-do list, Todoist. There's Google. Google has a one that I used for a while. I can't remember the name of it, but I used it for a while. There's Workflowy is very fun. If you ever use Workflowy, it can be very fun, a little addicting. I don't think it works well as you overly expand, but it can be pretty solid. It's a system of constantly digging down into multi-sub lists of different categories, and you can tag it and work with it really pretty well. For me right now, my go-to is Notion. It is the one I recommend the most. I would say that Trello does have the distinguishing aspect of the one I have used most consistently for the longest time.
Sure.
I believe Notion will take that over.
Sure.
But time-wise,
you sort of built your habit on Trello.
I built my habits on Trello
and now
a lot.
Notion is benefiting from that,
yes,
possibly.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of others. There's going to be a million others that I haven't heard of, I haven't used. I've had the benefit of being involved with multiple people who, like myself, who I've learned from over the years, and they share their tools with me. I have multiple friends who will be like, and this is how I found Notion. They'll say, oh, I just found this new system. I've been using it for like a few months pretty dedicatedly, and it's really working for me.
You test it.
I'll test it.
Yeah.
And I'll usually walk away if it's not currently fixing a need. Notion is one that I didn't use as heavily when I first learned about it. But then as time went on, I started moving my Trello over because it did do what I wanted, and I played with it. So be on the lookout. Always be on the lookout for whatever tool there is, because it will come down to what works, not just for people, but what works for you and your methods, your needs.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a thing. If you enjoy this type of content where I have a conversation and try to dig into things that benefit me and I find interesting, let me know down below. Hopefully we will continue doing them. I mean, in fact, I will continue doing them because I enjoy it. Hopefully you'll benefit from it. Whatever the case. Oh, this is so far away.